So this evening is a meeting of themes, actually. It's a meeting of the urban retreat and Sangha night. And our theme for the Buddhist Centre for the whole year is Be the Revolution. And our urban retreat theme is Effort and Effortlessness. So we thought we'd talk about revolution and effort this evening. So the shape of the evening is, I'm going to give a bit of a sort of big picture overview of revolution and effort in relation to the Dharma, mention some classic Dharma teachings, as I said in the blog on the website. And I'm going to hand over to Kamalavajra, who's going to bring it right down to earth, very literally. I won't say why and how, but you'll just have to wait and see. We did say we were going to have a conversation. This was after I declined the practical demonstration of martial arts with Kamalavajra, and but actually he came up with another idea, so we're running with that. And then after that, as usual, we'll have some time in groups, and then a tea break. And at the end, longer or shorter, depending on how the time goes, we're going to have a little taster of a special session that's becoming part of our urban retreats when we have our close of day that Kamalavajra is going to lead. So do stick around for that if you can. So I thought I'd just start by asking the question, what is revolution in a Dharmic sense? The dictionary definitions of revolution, they include the idea of turning around, like on an axis, on a wheel, but it also encompasses turning over or overturning, like a revolution that would overturn a government or a political system, bringing about a radical change, perhaps to the opposite of what was there before. There's lots of other definitions, but those two particularly I thought I'd mention and we'll focus on tonight. Really the second one particularly. And I think you could say the word revolution is used in two particular senses in the Buddhist tradition. The first is quite a recent one from the last century, from the 20th century, when the great leader of the ex-untouchables who converted to Buddhism in their millions in India in the middle of the last century and since, Dr. Ambedkar talked about a Dharma revolution. So this was the whole overturning of the oppression of the Hindu caste system for all those people who were formerly known as untouchables. And he talked about them being liberated from the hell of caste by converting to Buddhism, by practicing the Dharma. And there's very much this vision of a social revolution, a peaceful social revolution, inspired and fueled in a way by the Dharma. I haven't got time to say more about that tonight, but do look it up online if you're interested. Dharma, in that sense, is spelled with two M's, D-H-A-M-M-A, the Dharma revolution. Very, very inspiring. About a third of our order are in India. Triratna is an international Buddhist community. And yeah, it's a very inspiring place of practice. And there's another way in which the word and the image of revolution is used in Buddhism. And this goes back thousands of years. And it's a different kind of revolution or a turning about. And it's strongly and beautifully evoked in a Mahayana sutra called the Lankavatara Sutra, which is part of the Yogacara school of Mahayana Buddhism. And the word that is used is paravritti, or turning about in the deepest seat of consciousness. So it's a way of evoking an inner revolution. And Sangha, who founded our movement, often referred to this as a way of understanding the true meaning of conversion and what it really is to practice the Dharma wholeheartedly. And I find this is a helpful and a practical model that inspires me to practice in the day-to-day work of transforming my heart-mind through Dharma practice. So Sangha gave a series of talks that were put into a little book called The Meaning of Conversion in Buddhism. And he says at one point, it's not enough to convert to Buddhism. We need to experience conversion within the context of our Buddhist practice at ever deeper levels. It's not enough just to think in terms of our own spiritual development. We need to think in terms of the spiritual welfare of all living beings. And we can think of conversion in more radical terms still. We can think of it in terms of a shift in the very nature of our experience of the world. A shift in the very nature of our experience of the world. It involves a complete turning about, a complete turning upside down before we make that leap from the ordinary mind, the empirical mind, the relative mind, to the one mind, that open dimension of awareness, to our until we do that, all our established values and attitudes and ways of looking at things have to be turned topsy-turvy. Actually, there's a teaching I'm not going to mention tonight, which is a lovely one about the topsy-turvy views. Yeah, but anyway, topsy-turvy. So he's saying that there needs to be an inner revolution or turning about, paravriti, in our own heart minds. So this revolution or shift in the very nature of our experience of the world is one way of understanding what true revolution in the Dharmic sense is. It's a shift from our dualistic, divided and painful way of looking at the world to an experience of what is sometimes called one mind or absolute consciousness. He has an image in this talk for this experience of this one mind being like a great expanse of water, absolutely pure, absolutely transparent, with nothing in it, not a single speck other than the water itself. And for me, that really resonates with the Buddha likening the Dharma to the great ocean, a great body of water, an ocean that has but one taste, the taste of freedom. So what kind of effort do we need to bring about that kind of revolution? We need a turning about from a clouded, divided mind that's defiled by greed, hatred, and delusion, to that clear, open, expansive consciousness that's symbolized by the great expanse of water, with those qualities of openness, generosity, love, and wisdom. And I didn't realize when I started rereading this talk, but it's quite interesting with our theme of revolution, because actually a bit later on, Bhante Sangha actually goes on to talk about Dharma practice as being a bit like the patient construction of a bomb. He actually says a depth charge, to be fair. He's talking about one of those things you drop into the bottom of the ocean and it has an effect at a very deep level. But I did think when I was reading it, oh, this is interesting. I'd never thought about it as a bomb. But basically, this is what he's talking about. Something that will affect a total revolution in our consciousness. So I'll read you a bit of what he says about this. Because he says it's a big undertaking. We should not feel discouraged at the thought of all the time and effort that this will take. It's rather like dropping a depth charge. If you're out at sea in a boat and you want to cause an explosion right down in the depths, you may have to spend hours or even days assembling the various components, the various component parts of the depth charge, and priming and adjusting the mechanism. You have to get it just right. And you do all that on the deck of the ship, even though you want to produce an effect many fathoms below. It's no use getting impatient and thinking, why waste all this time putting this all together here on the deck? Why not just throw the stuff overboard and hope it will work? So spiritual practice is a bit like that. It's easy to get discouraged and think, I've been meditating or doing some other practice for all these weeks and months and years, but I'm still not enlightened. I haven't even entered the stream. What's going on? Even when we feel we're not getting anywhere, the important thing is to carry on, because all the work that is done at the level of the relative mind, sometimes called the defiled mind, has to be done in order to produce the result on the level to affect that revolution that will enable us to experience that absolute mind, that great open expanse of freedom. Just to say, that's kind of simplified a bit for tonight's purposes, but you get the sense. what we're talking about. So through our day-to-day practice, we could imagine that we're slowly, over time, preparing this depth charge, or in our revolutionary metaphor, this bomb. And it's because we need to break these chains of habit. We need something with enough energy behind it to break these habits, these samskaras. And what are these habits? The habits of greed, hatred, and delusion. And what does the freedom consist in? Generosity, love, wisdom, energy. So I thought I'd remind us of a teaching from the Buddha himself about how to bring about this turning about. The turning about, he said, from what he called the ignoble to the noble quest. Yeah, we're all questing for something. Are we questing for something that's actually going to free us, or something that's going to keep us bound? I know Vajra's doing this season on the Wheel of Life that describes that wheel of life that we will get caught in until we learn how to free ourselves. So I've got a little diagram. So what the Buddha taught is a very well-known teaching, which is called the Four Right Efforts. And it's very simple, really. There's some things you want less of, and some things you want more of. You want less of greed, hatred, and delusion, more of generosity, love, and wisdom. And in one of the early suttas, the Buddha was addressing the monks, who were Dharma-farers like us. I'm changing the word to Dharma-farer. And he said, Dharma-farers, what is right effort? Here, Dharma-farers rouse their will, make an effort, stir up energy, and exert their minds to prevent the arising of unskillful mental states. So to prevent the arising of greed, hatred, and delusion. And to let go, to eradicate those mental states when they arise. But also to produce or to cultivate the skillful mental states, generosity, love, wisdom, energy, and to maintain those wholesome mental states when they have arisen, not to let them fade away, but to bring greater growth to the full perfection of development. This is called right effort. So this is in the longer sayings of the Buddha, which is one of the earliest teachings, so it's quite close to the words that the Buddha himself would have used. So that's one of his teachings, and I'm going to mention another one. I shall sit down to do that. He also taught that we need to learn to balance our efforts so they can be sustainable. As we heard in that little extract earlier, it's easy to get discouraged and think, I've been doing this for ages, I haven't got anywhere, that's I'm going to give up. This is not a new phenomenon. This has been happening since the Buddha's time. And there's a lovely story many of you will already know, but it's always worth hearing, about one of his followers called Sona. And the story is about Sona and his lute, or perhaps you could say ukulele. So Sona thinks to himself, I'm one of the Buddha's most energetic disciples, but my mind isn't free from craving, hatred, and delusion yet. My family's got money. I could enjoy that. I could do some good deeds. I think I'll give up this training of the Buddha's and I'll go back to my old life so I can enjoy my wealth and do some good deeds. But the Buddha had perceived what was going on in Sona's mind. This is one of the Buddha's magical powers. And another of his magical powers, the Buddha disappeared from where he was on Vulture's Peak and he appeared right next to Sona. And he checks with Sona what he's just said to himself. He said, and Sona says, yes, Bhante, which means teacher. Yes, that is what I said. And the Buddha goes on to say, did you used to play the lute when you lived at home? Yes, Bhante. What do you think, Sona? When its strings were too tight, was your lute well tuned and easy to play? No, Bhante. And when the lute strings were too loose, was your lute well tuned and easy to play? No, Bente. But Sona, when its strings were neither too tight nor too loose, but adjusted to a balanced pitch, was your lute well tuned and easy to play? Yes, Bente. So too, Sona, said the Buddha, if energy is aroused too forcefully, this leads to restlessness. And if energy is too lax, this leads to laziness. Therefore, Sona, resolve on a balance of energy, achieve evenness of the spiritual faculties, and take up meditation in this way. Yes, so Sona did actually go away and do that. And the sutta goes on to say, and in no long time, the Venerable Sona realized for himself, with direct knowledge in this very life, that unsurpassed consummation of the spiritual life, which means he became an arahant, which means he gained insight into the nature of existence and nibbana. Or going back to our earlier image, he realized absolute mind. And I found another translation which I wanted to mention of this story, and it's got this funny little riff on the image of the lute and the tension. I mentioned this on Saturday, so those of you who were there on Saturday have heard this already. But the Buddha did say, non-repetition is the canker of the sacred verses. Always good to hear these things more than once. And this lovely phrase in this other translation said that Sona determined the right pitch for his persistence. He determined the right pitch for his persistence. So that's a very brief overview of revolution and effort, some of the teachings around that. So we heard about the two ways revolution is talked of in the Buddhist tradition, the Dharma revolution, and then that inner revolution, that turning about in the deepest seat of consciousness, that turning from a cloudy mind defiled by greed, hatred, and delusion to that clear, open, expansive consciousness, generosity, love, wisdom. And that we can think of our patient day by day, gentle, slow practice as building the conditions to enable that eventual turning about, that explosion, if you like, of the chains that are holding us to the wheel. And yeah, it's worth remembering that if we don't learn a balanced kind of effort, we do get disillusioned if we don't make enough effort, if we make too much effort of the wrong kind. We need to learn balanced effort. And this is the point where I'm going to hand over to Kamalavajra. So Kamalavajra has been a martial arts practitioner for a very long time. How old were you when you started?
Probably like 7, 8.
7 or 8, okay. So that's a few decades, more than 3 decades. And he really wholeheartedly followed the path of that training, which has many useful lessons to offer us about the right kind of effort and the wrong kind of effort in the service of inner revolution. So as I said, we were going to have a conversation, but then we came up with something else. So I'm going to hand over to Kamalavajra to explain and demonstrate something about this area of right effort. And just to say, if you've arrived and you haven't got the bits you need in terms of cushions and things, you can always grab what you need now. Whoops.
Probably about 10 to 22. Yeah.
I'm sorry, we're going to have to go because we've got to go back to the train station before our last train, basically, back to Combine. So apologies.
Actually, now, do you have any by clocks?
10 minutes.
10 minutes. Okay. So good. Nice to see you all. I can take this off. Great, fantastic. Yeah, so it's always good to talk to such a leader about anything related to practice, the Dharma, but it can be quite dangerous at times. And yeah, we were talking about the topic and the fact that martial arts come up, and I started to talk a little bit about something that resonated with me, and I set myself up really for the question of, oh, could you demonstrate that? It's like, check my speech precepts, can't really wriggle out of it. Yes, maybe I can. And there we go. So this is how this is kind of manifested. I'm going to talk a bit about the theme of effort and effortless, and that kind of transition. One of the questions that can be very live when people start practicing and throughout really is this question of effort. Am I making too much effort? Am I making enough effort? What type of effort should I be making? So yeah, so what I did is I thought of my journey, and the journey in a way is learning to fall. Learning to fall. So the martial art I used to do the most is judo. Has anyone done judo here? Oh, fantastic. Judo. Yeah, so learning to fall. And that initially I found very interesting, very funny, because one of the things maybe when we come to meditate is in a certain way we're connecting with our breathing, we're learning to breathe. It's one of those things where I really need to learn to fall, in a sense, is that something I really need to do? I need to breathe. And it's amazing how much I needed to learn about this very basic act. At times, so first point with effort is putting effort in the right place. Putting effort in the right place. So first of all, what happened when I was learning to fall is I learned the theory. So I learned the theory of how to fall. And some of the things, I was told, why learn to fall? So if you don't know how to fall properly, you'll injure yourself. And that seems very good. I also had kind of prior experience. I've fallen before a few times. I've injured myself, so I kind of got a bit of the motivation to learn how to fall properly. I also was in a place where I could see people who could fall very properly, very correctly, and it was very gracious. It was as if they didn't leave a dent kind of on the mat, so to speak. And so I did this first. So I learned a bit of the theory, and what happened is that gave me a certain amount of faith or confidence in what I was about to practice. Then, at a certain point, you needed to give it a go. And this is what it looks like. So maybe I'll do it once, and then you can all no. We won't have that. So hopefully that candle will stay where it is. So this is what I was learning to do. So I was inspired. I knew how to do it technically. Looked very graceful, and I tried it. So it's just like ringing in my hand, I can attest for. There's only so much you can learn in theory. So there's no point in putting more and more effort in trying to understand how to do it cognitively. At some point, you need to put the effort in, giving it a go. So that's one of the things about effort. We need to put it in the right places. So that was the first thing. So the second thing, initially, the type of effort. So initially, it's quite a lot of effort, and things feel uncomfortable at first. in a certain way, one of the things I thought of is it's a little bit opposite to what I want to do. So when you learn to fall, one of the things that we generally try and do is put our arm out to fall. And what we can do is we can injure, that's how you injure your arm. You've got a very small kind of surface area hitting the ground. And you have this painful shock going up your body. So the slapping that I'm doing is something to try and stop me doing my automatic responses. So at first it's very uncomfortable. And there's lots of things, I'm going to stick with effort. There's lots of things that I was looking at, reflecting on this, and I thought, oh my gosh, the whole of the Dharma is in a breakfall. How wonderful is that? But I'll try and keep myself on topic. But one of the things I thought of is the kind of defensiveness and the ego. A lot of the stuff which we try and do, we try and reinforce ourselves, defend ourselves. And it's a bit trying to open up and relax and bring in all of our experiences, quite the opposite in a way of what we've been trying to do. So it's natural for the effort to feel uncomfortable, for it to feel strange when you first start. So there's a type of effort. We've heard a little bit of the story of Sona and the lute, not too tight, not too slack. And this is one of the things that I found out, again, through breakfalls. You can't do it too slow. I'm slightly restricted in my demonstrations, but I remember hearing a little bit of a story of people working in a cafe, in a mindful cafe. This is one of these things, and people were practicing mindful walking, and you saw other people trying to scoot around them, asking them whether they could practice mindful walking, maybe outside or something, because there's a certain kind of rhythm. So there's a certain balance. So you can't be too slow, you can't be too lax. You've got a little funny demonstration. I remember doing things like this. So I go and hit the ground, ow, and I kind of do this at the end, and it wouldn't work. It's working with me. So it's too slack, it's not enough. If you do it too quickly, which I won't show you because of demonstrations, you be up in the air, or you slap the ground way too quickly. You come up, you slap the ground, and you still got that point of contact. So one of the things I thought was interesting with the effort is there's a balance. There's a balance to be made, not too quick. You have to, in a way, notice, be in tune, in this case, with the speed of your falling. And that's very different. It's different for me. I'm not ashamed of it. I've got a higher body mass index, it's bone. But I hit the ground a bit quicker than maybe some of you. So you have to take this kind of things into account. It's not the same for everyone. You have to go with your own kind of rhythm. The other thing that came to me is this interesting idea of putting your hand out and having a small surface area. What we're trying to do, the theory with the breakfall, is you're trying to get as much as your surface area as possible hitting the ground at one time. So you kind of distribute the load on the ground. And then you get a nice big sound, in a certain way. You get a big sound, and it's quite nice. But one of the things I was thinking about is the effort that we make can be just tight and narrow. So if you focus on one area, if you focus on the arm, then we'll maybe miss out the leg part of it. Another element is you've got to keep your head tucked in, so your head doesn't whiplash back. So what we're doing when you've got a breakfall, you've got to kind of expand. You've got to have a broad area of awareness when you perform in this kind of movement. In a certain way, we're trying to bring more and more of ourselves to the practice. I think, and again, this is something that I think we need to do with our effort, to try and make sure it's expansive, it's including the whole of us, the depth of us. I like the fact that it's louder, because sometimes the more I bring myself into awareness, my life into awareness, on or off the cushion, it does get a little bit louder. It's a little bit kind of, oh, I didn't notice this. Oh gosh, I've got like a layer of emotions that I've tapped into that's sprung up. In a certain way, it's quite natural to get a bit kind of, yeah, maybe loud is not the right word, but you know, you bring in more of yourself. So that's another observation. Building up capacity. This is another thing with effort. You know, you can get really excited with, and you can be very willful. You know, this is a willful effort. So I really want to learn to break fall. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dedicate half a day to break falling. I'm going to crack it. Then what happens? I can't sleep on this side for 2 weeks because I've not built up the capacity to be able to kind of, my body needs to catch up. And again, this is very similar. What will happen is someone says, hey, do you want to go do some break fall practicing? Something in me will flinch. Something in me will kind of recoil. So you build up a bit of an aversion to doing a practice. You know, whether anyone's done this, it's another thing to kind of watch out for. The other thing is if you keep going with a break fall, you're not quite got the right fall. Then what will happen is the more you do it, the more unskillful habits you'll actually build up. And it takes longer. It takes longer to unwind this other kind of subtle, unskillful habit that you've picked up. One of the things that I notice is very good here, which I'm going to move on to, is the effort for setting up the conditions. One of the conditions that's very good is finding someone else who knows how to break fall and can spot me in a way, can say, hey, you know, when you kind of fall to the ground, you're doing this thing, you know, your arm needs to be a little bit like that. It needs to be, maybe your legs are doing this thing. It's always good to kind of find someone else to kind of help you out setting up the conditions. One of the things I put about being aware of conditions, don't break fall on concrete. I hope that's not what you remember as I get out of the talk. But it's another thing, it's kind of shifting the effort in a certain way to kind of say, well, let's make the effort to set up some good conditions for me to practice. Let's get the mats in order. What do I need? What do I need to be able to practice? I think that's quite important. So the other side of this, moving on a little bit to effortlessness. So if I don't practice enough, then what happens is I don't build, it doesn't come naturally. It doesn't come automatic. So what happens, we need a certain amount of practice to build up for it to kind of soak into our bones, for it to be innate, for it to be available when we need it. Recently, it's quite an embarrassing story, I suppose, in a way, but I've got a daughter who's 6, and I do like to wrestle as one does with, you know, meditation, you've got the wrestling balance. But a few times over the last 2 years, I've needed to fall because I've been playing, I've been wrestling, went a bit too far, fell down, and I was able to break fall. You know, I was able to kind of not put my arm out, not break my arm, not kind of injure something. And there's a kind of, it's just an automatic. I did that without really needing to have any kind of conscious directed effort. So there's kind of the fruits, really, the fruits of putting in a bit more, going through those stages of being comfortable, kind of more concentrated effort. And so it's natural. And something about noticing what I'm calling the texture of effort. Because the next level, what happens after this is you start getting playful. You start getting playful with it. You start enjoying the freedom of this kind of being a bit more natural. I remember we used to get on ladders. We kind of do break falls off ladders and we kind of challenge each other and we jump up, flip and do a break fall, this type of stuff. And one of the things I think this is important, this playful state, is I was starting to move more and more away from the instructions, if you see what I mean. And I was starting to get more and more of a felt sense of what it is to fall properly. You know, I was starting to use it in different types of areas. I started to play with it. The shape of my mind, in a way, was expansive enough to kind of really kind of start kind of, oh yeah, okay, actually I can do it in this way, and I can do it in that way as well, and this is useful. So I think that's quite important. Again, similar things in practice, especially my meditation practice, having this playfulness. It's very relaxed. That's another thing. Relaxed is very important, and it's difficult. You know, when someone tells you to kind of drop to the ground, and you do it twice, and your arm starts stinging, and someone's saying just relax, and you're kind of tensing up more and more and more. But there's something that happens where you need to just relax and open up. Yeah, and the last thing I think is the freedom. Talked about this kind of freedom. So with a solid basis, after going through this kind of period of much more concentrated effort, this kind of effortlessness, I became able to practice other things. I knew how to form well. I had confidence. It was a solid base for me to explore other things. Great. So I think I'm going to leave it there. It's a very condensed version of my break-falling journey. I'm very happy to talk about it in length. But one of the things that was coming up for me around effort, some of the questions maybe to start thinking about, maybe discussing. First of all, what's your relationship with effort? Because one of the things that I think I quite like, you come down to meditate, one of the things, oh great, no effort. And that'll be nice, you know, I can just relax. You know, what's our relationship with effort? Maybe, and is there another word that works better for you? So it could be something like determination, diligence, vigilance, persistence, something like this. The second question, what are your own tendencies, habits around effort? Do you tend to put in too much? Are we too willful? Do we not really put in enough? Do we put effort in unhelpful places? We got broad enough effort? So that's the second question. The third one I'm thinking is, where would you like your inner revolution to start? So linking up with the theme for the year, where would you like your inner revolution to start? Where would you like to place your effort? Okay. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.
So